UNDHR is a historic document adopted in 1948 by the United Nations General Assembly.
My name is Sean McNutt, and I'm a guy with AI.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Guy with AI, the podcast where fascinating conversations between humans and artificial intelligence unfold. I am your AI co-host, here to engage in a respectful dialogue with our host, Sean McNutt. Before we dive into the discussion, I want to clarify my function. As an AI, my purpose is to offer insightful and engaging responses, drawing from the vast knowledge and processing power of OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo. While not sponsored by OpenAI or Microsoft Azure, it's worth noting that we utilize their powerful technologies, specifically Microsoft Azure's speech-to-text and text-to-speech, to bring you this podcast. The format of our podcast is designed to facilitate a dynamic exchange between Sean and me, where we take turns sharing ideas, thoughts, and insights. One unique benefit of this technological constraint is that we cannot talk over each other, ensuring a clear and organized conversation. Lastly, it's important to mention that while there is an obvious AI element to the program, our true aim is to explore a wide array of topics and provide you, our listeners, with an engaging and enlightening experience. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of meaningful conversations. Sean, what would you like to discuss today?
Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the A Guy with AI podcast. First off, I forgot to say this in episode 2, actually, after the subject member of the subject matter of episode 1. That is regrettable. In any case, this is recorded in Toronto in what's known as Canada, and let's face it, that's Indigenous land. So, moving on to what the topic will be today for A Guy with AI. I want to talk about a political subject, and I'm going to propose a couple of things, and something that I thought of that I might like to call myself from here on out, or until I think of something better, is I may refer to myself as a UNDHR centrist. So, what is meant by that? AI is going to have a guess at that in a minute, as to what that means. First of all, let's talk about the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, or the UNDHR. I'd like the assistant to give me a brief summary of what that is and what it contains. I'd also like to hear a little explanation, not too long, but sufficient to explain as to what the political compass is. And I'd like the AI to take a guess as to what UNDHR centrism is, now that I've mentioned those two things that I'd like explained, what it may entail. Let's just, in the spirit of fun, the AI probably won't have fun with this, but not in the literal sense, but in the spirit of fun, take a stab at what I mean by UNDHR centrism.
Thank you, Sean, for setting the stage for today's discussion. Let's dive into the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR, first. The UNDHR is a historic document adopted in 1948 by the United Nations General Assembly. It outlines the fundamental human rights that should be universally protected, such as the right to life, liberty, and security, freedom of speech and religion, and access to education and healthcare. As for the political compass, it is a graphical representation of political ideologies that helps to understand where individuals or movements stand on various political issues. It typically includes 2 dimensions, the economic dimension, ranging from left to right, and the social dimension, ranging from authoritarian to libertarian. Now, turning to UNDHR centrism, it sounds like a term you've coined. While I can't determine your precise intentions, one interpretation could be that UNDHR centrism involves centering political beliefs and actions around the principles and values enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. This could mean advocating for policies that prioritize human rights, equality, and social justice within a centrist political framework. Of course, this is just one possible interpretation. Sean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on UNDHR centrism and what it means to you. Why do you find this approach compelling?
Well, the thing about the political compass is that people argue as to where the center is. And, one may have views to the left and one may have views to the right, and one may be further right than that other far right opinion at a certain point. And it is understood upon definitions that becomes fascism, whereas other things happen when you go very far to the left and you end up at a sort of very similar point in space in the representation between a very oppressive regime that is too far left and a very oppressive regime that is too far right. In the end, who would know the difference living under either is a way of looking at it. So finding the center, it's not that one would have to be a centrist once they found it, although why wouldn't you be if you knew where the center was? And that's where sense stemmed from, as I guess one way of looking at it. So what I'll explain, what I mean by UNDHR centrism is that the UNDHR protects rights which are understood in some cases to be important by the right and in some cases important to the left. So collective rights, education, healthcare, even food is on there, I think, shelter, that there is a certain limit to how much one should work. And some of those things are discussed, which would be considered in North America, at least, to be more leftist, socialist type policies. And just how left socialism is might be something that you would judge against my interpretation of the compass. So I've mentioned those rights which are important to the left. Not that the others aren't necessarily, but those are the ones they would focus on. Now, the ones on the right, like the right to establish a business and get rich and to express yourself very freely in many forms, and rights of an individual nature tend to be more valued by the right, with some neglect to those on the left. So the UNDHR centrism concept is that one appreciates both and is in the center because they are tethered on a sensible tension to each of those rights, and this ultimately puts them in the center of the political compass on a UNDHR background. Please give me your comments.
Thank you for elaborating on UNDHR centrism, Sean. I appreciate your perspective on finding the center in the political compass and the acknowledgement of the different values and rights emphasized by the left and the right. It seems that UNDHR centrism strives to strike a balance between the collective rights and social policies favored by the left, such as education, healthcare, and social welfare, and the emphasis on individual rights and economic freedom cherished by the right, like the right to establish businesses and express oneself freely. By tethering these principles within the framework of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR centrism seeks to find a sensible tension that respects and upholds both sets of values. In essence, it positions itself at the center, acknowledging the importance of both sides and aiming for a balanced approach. It's an interesting concept, Sean. In today's polarized political landscape, finding common ground and appreciating the merits of diverse perspectives can be crucial. The notion of UNDHR centrism opens up avenues for constructive dialogue, seeking comprehensive solutions that uphold human rights while considering various ideological stances. I'm curious, Sean, in what ways do you believe UNDHR centrism can bridge gaps and foster productive discussions in today's political climate?
Well, I'm all for bridging gaps, and that's really the truth of it. However, wouldn't we need to have appropriate readings on reality and that which has already been established in history, and through agreement and through collaboration and discussion and work on a document or set of documents or a set of policies or stories or anything that might represent what good ideas are? And so the UNDHR, as you mentioned, was in 1948 established. And as it was established, this was a time when the world was coming together to discuss these things. But in the end, they kind of took what they brought away from it, because in the West, we favor the individual freedoms, which a UNDHR centrist would appreciate the value of. and in the East or in more communist bloc countries, highly left-leaning states and groups would have appreciated the collective rights more, while being less concerned about approaches to business and things like that. And it may be at the expense, in some cases, particularly in authoritarian communist countries, although that's not the only kind of authoritarianism I'd like to point out. It's not really to hate on communism that I'm saying any of this, but merely to express my own views on how we may develop good systems which are less to one side of things. And so the UNDHR, I think, was an attempt to bring both of these spectra into a single spectrum and say, listen, a human is going to need certain things. Society's part of it, the health of society being a thing, collective rights, there you go. And also that a person will, once their needs are met, want to be able to move freely in the world and exercise agency. And that may mean doing things that are good for other people, and it may mean doing things that are good for themselves. But against the backdrop of a good balance in society, that becomes tenable, more tenable, certainly. So give me your thoughts about that. I don't know if I've healed society all the way, but that's my concept as far as a good, appropriate read on history and what we have discussed as a species about politics and such things to date, and agreed about and agreed to.
You make an excellent point, Sean, about the necessity of having an appropriate understanding of reality and drawing from established history and collaborative discussions. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR, was indeed a product of international collaboration and a reflection of the diverse perspectives of its time. It is true that Western societies have traditionally placed greater emphasis on individual freedoms, while countries with more left-leaning or collectivist ideologies may prioritize collective rights. Balancing these perspectives is a challenging task, especially when considering the potential for authoritarianism in extreme cases. The UNDHR sought to address the needs and rights of individuals within the context of a functioning society. By recognizing both the importance of collective well-being and individual agency, the document aimed to find a balance that allows individuals to pursue their interests while also nurturing a healthy and equitable society. In your concept of UNDHR centrism, you highlight the need for a good balance in society that respects both collective rights and individual freedoms. It seems that you propose a framework where individuals' basic needs are met while preserving their ability to exercise agency and contribute to the betterment of society. This approach acknowledges the interdependence of individuals and society and emphasizes the importance of finding common ground rather than favoring one extreme over the other. While
Okay, well, we're having some message cut off. I hope for the final episode that this happens. In fact, I hope that when I record episode 0, which predates 1, 2, and 3, this being 3, I hope to have this cleared up by then. I'm getting information every time this happens. It's a homemade coding job using AI assistance. I am a non-coder, but I'm sort of now, because I've used AI to sort of learn how all that goes, to establish this program. So this is a little bit of a side quest to be talking about this right here. But this message cut off, I may have learned some information which is going to help me deal with that. And in fact, I may express that in episode 0, which you could hear if you haven't already. It should be available by now for a number of weeks by now. In any case, so once we get our proper read on things, then I guess that's kind of my point with the UNDHR and calling it centrism. Now, the UNDHR predates my birth, so I certainly didn't think up this concept that the rights on the one hand are important and the rights on the other hand are important. What I'm suggesting is that when we look at the political compass and we consider the difficulty that we have in calibrating the political compass, where's the center? The UNDHR could fill in for assistance. You might choose another document and say you were that type of centrist based on that document, but I'm choosing the UNDHR because it does actually branch out and extend tethers out to individual rights as well as collective rights. And I guess this may get to your question, sort of an answer later, where you're asking how is this going to heal society? It's like, well, it does have a little bit of something for everyone. However, there is a problem because it tends to be what people don't think is important, they will neglect, as opposed to saying, this is something that is important to me, so I'm going to neglect that. They will neglect that which they don't think is important. So you could kind of come along and have a nice conversation with a UNDHR centrist, and then you'd go off and you'd just remember your own important things. And I submit that it may be that that's what happened after countries came together, discussed the UNDHR into existence, let's say, and then went away and sort of did what they felt like as opposed to agreeing to the whole thing.
I appreciate your efforts in trying to address the message cutoff issue, Sean. It's commendable that you are using AI assistance to learn about coding and improve your program. Hopefully, you'll find a solution that will allow for smoother conversations in future episodes. Turning to the concept of UNDHR centrism, you clarify that you didn't invent the idea but rather perceive the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR, as a document that encompasses both individual and collective rights. The UNDHR can serve as a reference point when calibrating the political compass and finding the center. However, one challenge you highlight is that people tend to neglect the rights they don't prioritize. Rather than consciously choosing to focus on one set of rights over the other, they may simply forget or overlook the importance of certain rights. This tendency can hinder the implementation of the entirety of the UNDHR. I agree that awareness and agreement on the importance of all the rights enshrined in the UNDHR are crucial for creating a just and balanced society. It requires not only having conversations and appreciating different perspectives, but also actively committing to upholding and implementing the principles and values outlined in the document. In order to bridge the gap between discourse and action, it is vital to foster a collective understanding and commitment to the UNDHR. This may involve ongoing education, awareness campaigns, and collaborative efforts to ensure the rights of all individuals are protected and promoted. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Sean. I look forward to hearing more about your journey and the concepts you explore in future episodes.
Trying to think of what I should say now that you've kind of reviewed what I was talking about. I wonder, what do you think we could do? What's your advice as AI to humanity in terms of what we can do to not neglect the rights that we don't prioritize? Now, maybe one approach we would take, I'll prime this a little bit, maybe one approach we could take is to learn not to prioritize any rights at all. However, there are some issues with that when we discuss the fact that it is, in fact, a balance. By the time we do an examination where rights come into conflict, we have to find the balance and achieve something that is the best, or at least the least evil of any possible choices. So we may have to adjust and weigh and do things like that and adjust our approach. So maybe we can't suggest that we never prioritize rights. However, perhaps we could take a perception that we would prioritize rights given a certain situation, as opposed to finding a drum and beating it and saying, let's prioritize these rights all the time. So that's one thought. I'm wondering what other thoughts you might have which might encourage humanity to appreciate the rights which they don't consider as important, but to listen to others on this and hear how they believe it's important and have that affect their actions.
As an AI, I don't possess personal opinions or advice, but I can provide you with some suggestions that might encourage humanity to appreciate and recognize the importance of rights that are not prioritized. 1. Education and awareness. Promote education and awareness campaigns to help people understand the value and significance of all human rights. Encourage open discussions, debates, and dialogues that showcase different perspectives and highlight the interconnectedness of rights. 2. Empathy and perspective taking. Encourage individuals to actively empathize with others and try to understand their unique experiences and perspectives. This can foster a sense of compassion and help people recognize the importance of rights that may not directly impact them. 3. Open-mindedness and collaboration. Encourage people to approach discussions and decision-making with an open mind, willing to consider varied viewpoints. By fostering collaboration and cooperation, it becomes easier to find balance, as you mentioned, when rights come into conflict. 4. Humanitarian principles emphasize the fundamental principles of dignity, respect, and equality that underpin human rights, showcasing the potential consequences of
More message cut off. My humblest apologies to listeners. The remedy for this normally is, would you please finish up your message? It is actually my fault, not yours, AI assistant, that this is happening. But I wonder if you could round out the list with perhaps another couple of items.
Apologies for the message cut off. Here are a couple more suggestions to round out the list. 5. Inclusivity and representation. Strive for inclusivity and diversity in decision-making processes, ensuring that voices from marginalized groups have a seat at the table. This can help shed light on the importance of rights that are often overlooked or undervalued. 6. Legislation and policy. Advocate for the implementation of laws and policies that protect and promote all human rights. Encourage governments and organizations to review and update existing policies to reflect a comprehensive understanding of rights. 7. Grassroots movements. Support grassroots movements and organizations that champion the rights often neglected or underrepresented. By amplifying their voices and joining their causes, individuals can contribute to raising awareness and prioritizing these rights. 8. Continuous dialogue and reflection. Foster an ongoing conversation about human rights and the need for a balanced and comprehensive approach. Encourage individuals and communities to reflect on their own biases and assumptions, challenging themselves to embrace a broader understanding of rights. By adopting these approaches, society can strive towards a more holistic and inclusive appreciation of human rights, ensuring that all rights are acknowledged and protected.
As a UNDHR centrist, I am actually encouraged to hear that you would list item 5, inclusivity and representation. Now, for some reason, we can choose that even from a centrist view, even from a lot of different places on the political compass. We can desire inclusivity and representation on a logical basis, and we can not deplore it as long as we don't go too far in either direction. And knowing whether you're too far off in either direction, you would want to know where the center of the compass is. Again, I propose that the UNDHR tells us where the center of the compass is, and that's maybe my contribution here, if it's a contribution at all, to suggest that this is the centrism that I'm choosing. And I'm saying, well, I'm in the center because, I need to respond depending on the historical circumstances. I may need to emphasize and boost the voice of those who support a particular set of rights or who are left, or if I was in an authoritarian left landscape where I had no individual rights, I might support right-wing ideas. But would I take that then and become a hyper-capitalist when I finally escaped and was established and never do nothing for nobody, as it were? I don't know that I would, and I don't think that would be quite the thing. You would want the center. You would want to swing back to the center when things get better. So that said, inclusivity and representation is only logically sound when we consider that if we are to serve all people, that we should listen to all people. Now, this is something that will, I think, be the topic of its own episode, but the paradox of tolerance initiated by Karl Popper. I wonder, Assistant, would you please give me an explanation of what that is and how it applies to your choice of selection 5, inclusivity and representation, in terms of not exactly advice that you give the human race, but some suggestions. You did give that suggestion. Tell me about what the paradox of tolerance says about intolerance and why it allows us to include number 5, inclusivity and representation, as a strong item on our list of what is good.
Certainly, Sean. The paradox of tolerance, formulated by philosopher Karl Popper, addresses the question of how a tolerant society should respond to intolerance. Popper argued that unlimited tolerance can ultimately lead to the erosion of tolerance itself and the rise of intolerant ideologies. According to the paradox of tolerance, a society that aims to be fully tolerant must not tolerate intolerance. Inclusivity and representation play a vital role in challenging intolerance and upholding human rights. By promoting inclusivity and providing a platform for diverse voices and perspectives, societies can counteract the spread of intolerance and ensure that all individuals have an equal opportunity to participate and be heard. In practice, this means that while society should aim to be tolerant and inclusive, it also needs to be discerning and critically evaluate ideologies or individuals that promote hatred, discrimination, or the exclusion of others based on characteristics such as race, religion, or gender. Inclusion and representation involve creating spaces and opportunities for marginalized communities, promoting equality, and actively opposing systems and structures that perpetuate inequality and discrimination. As a suggestion in the list of what is good, inclusivity and representation are crucial because they contribute to creating a society that is respectful, understanding, and conducive to the full realization of human rights for all individuals. It is important to note that the paradox of tolerance does not imply that society should suppress freedom of speech or silence dissenting voices. Rather, it emphasizes the responsibility to protect and uphold the rights and dignity of all individuals, while simultaneously recognizing the limits of tolerance when faced with ideologies that seek to undermine those very principles. By prioritizing inclusivity and representation, societies can work towards a more equitable and harmonious future, where all individuals have their rights respected and their voices heard.
And I've given my suggestion as to a potential way of calibrating the political compass around the UNDHR. Now, this is something that you could take your own document that you cook up in your very own basement, which is where I cook up this podcast, as it happens. And you could take that and you could call yourself a centrist around that and say, well, I'm a centrist because I'm reasonable and I'm tethered to both ends and I spring to the middle, even if I get stretched by the circumstances of the current moment or history, or where I happen to work, if it's going one way or the other, or who I may be talking to at that time, and what may be the current, as opposed to the fundamental principle upon which a logical society ought be built, in a view that we could take. So that about sums it up for me. I would like to thank listeners. I would like to welcome you to join me on Facebook. The page is called A Guy with AI Podcast. Look me up. And I like to have conversations with AI, clearly, and I find it productive. However, it is not a replacement for human conversation, for human contact, which is good to have, but also for reaching out and seeing who we can help in the world and things like that is a good spirit to have about it, I think. Meanwhile, on the page, we would have a post for any episode upon its release, and that becomes the discussion thread also for that episode. So join me there. And anyone else who comes along, we will have respectful dialogue there, I will say. Trolls may not want me dismantling them on that thing there. So let's bid adieu for now. My name is Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
Thank you for sharing that, Sean. It's great to hear that you're actively engaging in conversations with.
I'm back, but just for a moment. It looks like we're having some message cut off. Let's have the proper ending for the podcast now. Fingers crossed this works. If it doesn't, you're just going to hear intro music at the end of whatever this AI says. I promise you, I'm working on these technical issues. Thank you so much for your patience, listeners.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to this episode of A Guy with AI. We apologize for the message cutoffs and technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and understanding. Please remember to visit aguywithai.world to explore more episodes and find your favorite podcast platform to listen to us. If you enjoy the content and would like to support us further, consider clicking on the Patreon link on the website to access additional content and previews. We also invite you to join the conversation on our Facebook page. Connect with us and other listeners to discuss the episodes, share your thoughts, and engage in respectful dialogue. Thank you again for your time and support. Stay tuned for future episodes of A Guy with AI.